The storm came without a single warning. At first, it was only a bruised purple smear on the horizon, then it exploded into a howling force that tore across the prairie. Thunder cracked like the sky being split in two. The wind toppled wagons, ripped canvas covers free, and sent the horses screaming in blind panic. Norah clung to the back of the last wagon, her fingers slipping on rain-soaked wood until they bled. Rain lashed her face like knives. Then everything happened too fast. The wagon lurched, her grip gave way. She fell hard into the freezing mud, her shoulder slamming into the ground. When she struggled to her feet, the world around her had dissolved into darkness, water, and endless thunder. She shouted for her parents in desperation, but no answer came. The storm swallowed every familiar sound, leaving her alone in the chaos. Time lost all meaning. When the rain finally softened and the thunder faded into the distance, the silence that followed felt heavier than the storm itself. No voices, no hoofbeats, no lantern light, only Norah, kneeling in the cold mud, facing a terrible truth. She had been left behind alone in the wilderness. When the storm finally withdrew, Norah was still kneeling in the mud, her whole body trembling in the terrifying silence it left behind. No thunder, no hoofbeats, only a cold emptiness closing in around her. And then she heard footsteps. Not the hurried steps of settlers, nor the stalking tread of a wild animal. These were slow, deliberate, steady. A deep voice emerged from the darkness. "You fell out of the storm." Norah flinched and looked toward the faint moonlight. A tall figure stood motionless at the edge where light met shadow. She couldn't see his face, only a still silhouette and eyes fixed on her. Fear tightened around her chest. "I walk where others don't dare," the man said after a pause. As Norah staggered to her feet, he reached out and steadied her. His hand was rough, but warm against the cold. He told her she shouldn't stay here. This was a place where cold and darkness waited for no one. With no other choice, Norah followed him into the deep forest. Beneath a rock overhang, he lit a small fire. The flames revealed a scarred face and dark eyes, hard but not cruel. "They used to call me Gray Fox," he said. And on the first night after the storm, Norah was no longer completely alone. Dawn arrived cold and unforgiving. When Norah woke, Gray Fox was already standing a few steps away, silent as if he had never slept. There were no words of comfort, no unnecessary questions, only a strip of dried meat placed beside her and a short command: "Eat, then we move." They left the shelter while mist still clung to the ground. Norah followed behind, her legs heavy as lead, her shoulder aching from the fall the night before. She slipped more than once, but Gray Fox only handed her a smooth, carved walking stick. "The ground lies," he said. "Don't trust what your eyes tell you. Test it before you step." Along the way, he taught her how to listen. Leaves brushing together warned of a change in wind. Soft earth meant water hidden beneath. Brittle branches would betray careless footsteps. He didn't speak much, but every movement was a lesson. By midday, beneath the wide canopy of pine trees, he gave her a mixture of herbal powder and water. The bitterness burned down her throat, but warmth quickly spread through her chest. "This land has teeth," he said. "It crushes those who think it's gentle." Norah looked down at her scraped, trembling hands. "I used to be weak," she admitted. Gray Fox didn't argue. He simply stood and said, "But you're still alive." And from that moment on, Norah began learning how not to be weak anymore. Near the end of the day, as the light faded beneath the thick canopy of trees, Gray Fox stopped abruptly. He raised a hand in warning. Norah froze at once, her heart pounding in her chest. He crouched low, pressing his ear close to the ground, his eyes scanning every gap between the trunks. Then he spoke in a near whisper. "Someone's to the north." He didn't need to explain. Norah felt the shift in the air. The wind seemed to hold its breath. The forest fell into an unnatural stillness. They changed direction immediately, slipping deeper into the dense eastern thicket. Gray Fox showed her how to move without sound, placing the ball of the foot first, avoiding dry branches, keeping her breathing steady. This was no longer a journey. It was an escape. When night fell, they hid beneath a moss-covered outcrop. No fire, no raised voices. Only darkness and the rhythm of their hearts. "Who are they?" Norah whispered, Hunters, he answered. Why are they chasing us? Gray Fox looked at her longer than usual. Because we exist. The answer was colder than the night wind. Not because they had done something wrong, not because they had struck first, simply because they were alive on land others wanted to control. Norah clenched her fists. She was beginning to understand. In this world, some predators need no reason, and if she didn't learn how to stand her ground, she would always be prey. The next morning, they crossed a dead land. Blackened tree trunks stood like gigantic skeletons driven into a field of gray ash. Each step shattered the dry surface beneath their feet, the brittle crunch sounding cold and hollow. Norah looked around, her throat tightening. What happened here? Gray Fox didn't slow down. They came with torches, he said evenly. Called it clearing the land, but this place had once been alive. There had been homes, laughter, stories told by firelight. Now there was only the stale scent of old smoke and a silence that stretched all the way to the horizon. Was this your home? She asked softly. He didn't answer. But the tight set of his jaw and the weight in his eyes said enough. They moved faster across the ash, as if staying even a moment longer might drag the memories fully back to the surface. From time to time, Gray Fox bent down and swept away their footprints with his cloak, not only to hide from the hunters, but as if he were trying to erase the traces of his own past. Norah felt something shift inside her. This land wasn't dangerous only because of beasts or those who hunted them. It was dangerous because of people, and for the first time, she understood that Gray Fox wasn't just teaching her how to survive. He was teaching her why they had to keep living, so they wouldn't be erased like the ashes beneath their feet. Night fell in the narrow canyon, the wind howling along the rock walls like mourning cries. Gray Fox didn't light a fire. He sat motionless in the darkness, one hand resting near the hilt of his knife, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows. To Norah, that silence felt more frightening than pursuit itself. "Will they find us?" she whispered. He answered slowly, "They don't need to find you." Norah frowned. "What do you mean?" Gray Fox looked straight at her. "They only need you to be afraid." The words struck harder than any thunder of hooves. If fear made her freeze, panic, miss the signs of danger, then the hunters had already won, even without laying a hand on her. "I don't want to be afraid," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "No one does," he replied. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it." The wind still screamed above them, but Norah began to understand. Fear wasn't the enemy, it was a tool. If she let it control her, she would become prey. But if she learned to grasp it, to hold it in her palm like a blade, she could survive. In the darkness, she drew a deep breath and forced her heartbeat to slow, not because the fear was gone, but because she was beginning to choose not to let it decide for her. The smell of smoke came before the figures appeared. Gray Fox stopped short on the trail, his eyes sharp as a blade. "They're close," he whispered. This time there was no more running. "What do we do?" Norah asked, her throat dry. "Teach them that prey can bite." He pulled her down into a shallow hollow near a dry creek bed. Under the moonlight, they set traps. Vines stretched across the path, loose stones wedged high on the slope, sharpened stakes hidden beneath rotting leaves. Norah's hands trembled, but they didn't stop. Every knot she tied forced her racing heart to slow. Laughter and footsteps drifted closer. Two figures appeared on the rocky ledge, careless and confident. A sharp crack, the snare snapped tight. One man pitched forward, screaming. The other cursed and raised his rifle. Gray Fox moved like darkness given form. He knocked the gun aside and crashed into him. A blade flashed, ragged breaths, the sound of bodies colliding, then silence. He turned to Norah, chest heaving. "You have to go. There are more." "No," she blurted. He pressed an old compass into her hand. "Keep the moon at your back. Find the river bend. I'll come." In that moment, Norah understood. Sometimes survival means leaving. She closed her fingers around the compass and turned into the night forest. And the girl who had once been prey began to walk like an apprentice hunter. The forest closed in behind Norah, like a door with no way back. For the first time, she walked without Gray Fox ahead of her. There was only the dim moonlight, her pounding heartbeat, and the cold weight of the compass in her hand. She remembered every lesson he had given her. Keep the moon at your back. Listen before you step. Don't let panic choose your path. A branch snapped behind her. A man's voice drifted somewhere in the darkness. They were still following. Fear surged like a rising tide, threatening to pull her under. But this time, she didn't let it. She crouched low, pressing her hand to the ground. Cold, damp, the wind had shifted. She circled wide around thick tree trunks, avoided dry branches, placed her feet as lightly as she had been taught. When the voices drew closer, she didn't hesitate, she ran. Thorns tore at her sleeves. Stones slid beneath her boots. She fell, then forced herself up and kept moving. When the compass slipped from her hand during the stumble, her heart clenched. But then she noticed the thick moss clinging to the northern side of the trees. She didn't need the needle anymore. She remembered. The sound of running water reached her ears like a promise. Dawn washed the sky in pale pink as she reached the riverbank and collapsed in exhaustion. She had made it, alone, and for the first time, Norah knew she could truly survive without anyone leading the way. Just as Norah reached the riverbank, exhausted but alive, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, knife raised, and her breath caught when she saw Gray Fox staggering out of the trees. He was wounded. Blood soaked one side of his shirt, his steps heavy and uneven. "I told you I'd find you," he murmured, before collapsing. Norah rushed to him. She was no longer the trembling girl lost in the storm. She tore cloth for bandages, built a smokeless fire, boiled water, crushed herbs, just as he had taught her. Her hands shook, but she didn't hesitate. Then came the sound of hooves. They hadn't given up. Gray Fox was too weak to stand. Norah scanned the surroundings, her heart pounding but her mind clear. If they were going to live, this time she had to be the one who stood. She left the riverbank, set traps along the trail, and melted into the shadows of the trees. When the first pursuer appeared, he never saw her, only heard the snap of a trap and his horse's scream of panic. Norah struck, not with rage, with survival. When it was over, she returned to the river. Gray Fox was sitting up now, weak but conscious. He looked at her for a long moment. "You're no longer prey," he said. And for the first time, Norah believed it. They left the riverbank as the sun climbed higher into the sky. Gray Fox was still weak, but each step he took was no longer a step of flight, it was a step of searching. Norah walked beside him, steadying him when needed, her eyes no longer clouded with panic. She had changed. A week later, they stood atop a hill overlooking a lush valley below. A winding stream cut through grasslands untouched by fire, uncrushed by human ambition. "There," Norah said softly. Gray Fox looked at her, as if waiting for the final answer. "How long?" he asked. "As long as we can," she replied. They raised no flags, they carved no names into stone. They built only a simple shelter, lit a small fire, and kept a single promise to live not in flight, but in rebuilding what remained. Norah was no longer the girl torn from a wagon by a storm. She was someone who had walked through ashes, through fear, and chosen to stay. After fire, there is still life. After loss, there is still a beginning. If this story made you believe in the power of resilience, share it, leave your thoughts, and follow the journey ahead, because sometimes what survives the ruin becomes the strongest thing of all.